Good morning once again. Today I'm doing a training video on how to defend against unauthorized overtime discipline. Believe it or not, this is one of the easiest disciplines to defend against. Why? Because you have ample opportunities as a carrier to meet your reporting requirements. And once you do, now the ball's in management's court. For example, you can tell them in the morning, I'm going to be able to finish this assignment in 8 hours. And it doesn't matter if you have a piece, a swing, or whatever you might want to call it, a relay. Remember, as a regular, you are only guaranteed 8 hours. So anything over 8 hours, you must inform management your reporting requirements, which are contained in the M41 handbook. So let's say you don't do it in the morning. You have another opportunity when you go to look at your DPS. You have another opportunity to inform them. Now, based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like I'm not going to be able to make it in 8 hours. Once you do this, you have the upper hand. Management knows this, and that's why you get that, are you sure? I need a commitment from you. Please justify why it's going to take you more than 8 hours, so on and so forth. Do you have to do that? No. All you have to do is notify them it is your opinion that you are not going to make it within 8 hours. Of course, if they give you a 39.96 and it's not the month of December, you do have to write a reason on that 39.96. Now, let's say you forget. You went to the street and forgot to inform them. Is all lost? No. All offices have a call-in cutoff time for you to call if you unexpectedly run behind. Again, you can call or you can even text now on their scanner and inform them that it's going to take you more than 8 hours. But what if you get no response? What should you do? I would try again a little later. Call again a little later, or text them again a little later. If they give you a just cause interview, it'll be so easy to defend you. You'll be able to say, I called twice, or I texted you twice, or 3 times, or whatever it may be. Now, what if you get a stupid answer? Like, well, finish it and be back by such and such time. Something that you know is impossible. This was addressed long ago in a national Step 4 decision from October 2nd, 1972. Again, you can Google NALCMRS and input the number 326. This decision is known as M326, and it states, the grievance did inform management of their inability to complete their routes in 8 hours. Further, it was demonstrated that they were ordered by management to complete the routes. Although there was no expressed authorization to complete the delivery of the mail on an overtime basis, the permission would be inherent in the authorization to continue delivery after notification that the grievance were unable to complete the routes. This is the current postal policy regarding the stupid instructions. Sometimes management will give you a just cause interview anyway. As I discussed in my previous video, you, the steward, must take control of that just cause interview. Sometimes management will veer off and start trying to ask, well, what changed between the time you left the office and the time you called us to tell us that you needed more time on your route? What do you do then when they're trying to shift the blame to the carrier and you didn't have a chance to discuss that with the carrier? Or maybe they want to know about the commitment, the so-called commitment you made to them in the morning. I don't make any commitments except to my wife. I've made a commitment to her. So I wouldn't do that either. But you again, as the steward, respectfully state, well, Mr. or Mrs. Supervisor, since you are now asking us about this issue and I haven't had an opportunity to speak with the carrier about this, we're going to step outside. Get up. Start walking out. No matter how much that supervisor rants and raves, remember you are in a steward duty protected activity status. You do not have to follow management's instructions while you are conducting your steward duties. So walk out of that room confidently. Call the carrier over. Naturally, they will follow your lead. Now you can step out of earshot or perhaps into another room and talk about this new issue that came up and have that pre-meeting interview. That is your legal and contractual right, according to Weingarten. If the next question is again something you didn't have the chance to have a pre-meeting, you're going to repeat the process. Again, you're going to confidently tell that supervisor what's going on, and you're going to step out of the room and have another pre-meeting. Eventually, what will happen? Management will stop objecting to the pre-meeting, and they may even hand you the questions before the just cause interview so you can help prepare the answers with the carrier. Well, now you've gone through the just cause interview. What should you do? After the last question is answered, I like to tell the carrier there in front of the supervisor, you will probably be disciplined for this. It makes the supervisor uncomfortable, and it sets it officially for the carrier to know that they must contact you. You only have 14 days to file a grievance. They have to call you right away. So I'm going to provide you an example of a suspension letter here after this where I represented a carrier at the just cause interview for unauthorized overtime. So let's move on for the sake of time. Again, the carrier brings you the discipline management issued him or her. What should you do first? Look at the issuing date. Is it the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 14th date? That's going to determine what you're going to do. If you're an informal A steward and you don't have to meet on it immediately in order to conserve the time limits, what are you going to do? You're going to read the discipline in its entirety. Just because you know it's about unauthorized overtime, don't just read the first page. Again, as I mentioned before, sometimes management cuts and pastes and leaves other accusations in there that they never even asked the carrier about, making the discipline defective, as they haven't given them due process for that issue. If it's a letter of warning, it's pretty straightforward. If it's a suspension or higher, of course, there's more hoops that management is going to have to go through. Today, we're going to concentrate on a letter of warning. What do you do next? You're going to submit a written request for information with a signature and date required of management so that we know when that documentation request was submitted. But what should you request? Well, all grievances should have the clock rings requested of the people involved. I'm going to list out the items to request, and then I'm going to go through their importance. Number 1, the clock rings. Again, very important. You're going to see how much overtime was worked that day, whether the carrier had a pivot or a swing, exactly what we're looking at that day. Number 2, management's copy of the just cause interview. Number 3, any and all PS Form 3996s for the carrier for the dates in question. Number 4, the PS Form 1017B. Number 5, the PM call-in log or scanner text log from the carrier for the date in question. Number 6, all statements, interviews, emails that management relies on to issue this discipline. Number 7, USPS policy regarding unauthorized overtime when instructed to finish delivery. Number 8, the overtime alert report office-wide. Easy, right? Now, the clock rings, I've already mentioned why they're so important. An argument can be made that the amount of unauthorized overtime is de minimis or meaningless, and therefore it doesn't deserve discipline, especially because the overtime alert report may show that everybody in the office worked that or a similar amount of overtime. Number 2, sometimes their just cause notes differ from the union's just cause notes. Management's notes differ. which ones should we use? We want to use the ones that are the most favorable to the carrier. Number 3, the 3996s, if they exist. Perhaps you can find where the split was. You can find out exactly how long that swing was. And perhaps the amount listed on the 3996 was altered. Maybe the carrier was giving away 2.5 hours, but said it was only 2 hours. And if none exist, an argument can be made that management failed to issue any 3996s even after being informed that the carrier would not be able to finish their assignment in 8 hours. Number 4, the 1017B, the PS Form 1017B. This is perhaps the most important form in this case. If it doesn't exist, that makes your whole case. See, the M39 states this is the form management must complete in order to track all unauthorized overtime. Our position is that if this form doesn't exist, no unauthorized overtime exists either. If you are provided a PS Form 1017B, this will be a point of attack in this case. Management has to fill out 10 fields, and I'm going to show you an example of this form as well. Specifically, fields 6, 7, and 9 are the most problematic for management. Why is that? Because they have to commit to total overtime for the day. I don't know how they get this wrong, but they do. Sometimes they look at the clock rings wrong and they don't put the total overtime there. So it'd be inaccurate. Field 7, the amount of overtime unauthorized. This is tricky for them because when do they fill this form out? Usually before the just cause interview. At the just cause interview, the carrier sometimes gives them new information they didn't take into consideration, such that they talked to another supervisor or they had a different swing. And guess what? That overtime then, we would argue, that overtime wasn't unauthorized at all. Your form is inaccurate. Just like in attendance discipline, the next field, number 9, is the worst for them. See, it says the date the employee was notified, and they have to fill that out too. Undoubtedly, it will be before the just cause interview. So if they already notified the employee, we're going to take the position we did on the discipline. If you already notified them, then you've given them a discussion in accordance with Article 16.2. It was a minor offense. For you to add discipline on top of that now is a form of double jeopardy. You'd be surprised how much mileage that argument gets us. Number 5, the call-in log. Obviously, if the carrier called or texted, they notified management, they met the reporting requirements, whether it was for traffic, weather, or any other reason. We take the position that if management didn't tell them to bring the mail back and they finished delivery, the step 4 that I read earlier would apply. The permission would be inherent in the authorization to continue delivery after notification that the grievance were unable to complete their routes. Number 6, these statements, witness statements or interviews they relied on. If they exist at all, you can now cross-examine those witnesses or supervisors, which you'll find a lot of good information there, contradictory information. If there are none, again, guess what? It's just the carrier's word against the supervisor's word. Number 7, the postal policy regarding what to do when they tell you to finish it. They won't be able to find that. Why? Because it's the step 4. That is the postal policy. So we can provide that to them. Number 8, the overtime alert report office-wide. Again, how much overtime did other carriers work on these dates? Same or similar? Then where's the harm? If everybody worked overtime that day. Now, Let's pretend you have a conscientious, responsive, and responsible manager or supervisor, and they provide you most, if not all, of the information you requested. You have a solid case where now you can meet at informal A. Or if you had to wait until the formal A to take all these steps, you have a solid basis to write an appeal to step B if they don't want to resolve this discipline in a fair and carrier-friendly manner. But what about the interview? Let's not forget that. What will you ask? Each case is a little different and will be based on the documentation, but there are a set of general questions. Number 1, my all-time favorite. Would you like to reduce this discipline to a discussion? Number 2, please explain why you have failed to provide such and such document. Number 3, please explain why you have disciplined the grievant when he finished delivery of his assignment without accident or incident. You're going there to the issue that there's no harm. Number 4, please explain why you waited so many months, weeks, or days to issue this discipline. Number 5, I noticed the grievant was never forewarned that his finishing the assignment could result in discipline. Is that correct? You're going to get a lot of mileage. You get very far out of these I notice questions. Why? You're basically making an argument and then asking the supervisor to confirm or deny or disagree with your premise. You're also boxing them in. If they forewarn the carrier after the alleged overtime, we'll take the position. And remember that 1017B is going to say on what date they notified them. It'll be most likely before they issue the discipline. So we're going to take the position that they already gave them a discussion, and now they're adding to the penalty. If they never forewarned the carrier, then they violated a basic tenet of just cause. Number 6, isn't it true the carrier met their reporting requirements when they notified you of their inability to finish their assignment in 8 hours? Number 7, were you aware the carrier called or texted for instructions prior to working the overtime? No matter how they answer, they're admitting to the fact that the carrier did notify them, aren't they? Number 8, why did you choose to issue him a letter of warning or notice of suspension instead of a discussion or a letter of warning? Basically, again, the lower form right below the form of discipline they issued. You can maybe see their reasoning, or they might even say, because I was told to, because the district is coming down on us for this. A command decision, which would make your grievance a slam dunk. And number 9, did you ever consider issuing a lower form of discipline? If so, what was that lower form? Number 10, please explain how you came to the conclusion that blank number of minutes or hours were unauthorized. And again, you're going to confirm that they did fill out that 1017B if they filled it out on the date prior to issuing the discipline. Number 11, how were you able to determine the overtime was unauthorized prior to investigating at the just cause interview? Because they've already filled out that form saying it was unauthorized. What could grievant have possibly answered at the just cause interview to convince you that you filled out the PS form 1017B incorrectly? Now, we all know 99.9% of the time, once they conduct the just cause interview, it's because they're going to issue the discipline. And it doesn't matter what you say. So that leads us to number 13. How was this a fair and objective investigation? And finally, number 14, if you had spoken to the carrier prior to him or her working the overtime, isn't it true you would have just told them to finish delivery? Most of the time, the answer to that is affirmative. I hope you see the similarities between this case and defending against an attendance case. See, the tenets of just cause never change. We just have to apply them differently depending on the situation. This one, of course, has more questions because it's usually a his word against her word, if if you know what I mean. I hope this helps. I intend to do more videos on discipline as well as contractual issues in the future. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to help you. Thank you. Have a good day.